Mommy hasn't eaten. Can you share expired bread? The boy's small voice barely carried over the soft hum of the winter wind outside the shelter. Daniel froze in the doorway, his hand gripping the cold metal handle, unsure if he should step back or forward. It wasn't the words themselves that stopped him. It was the way the boy said them, a combination of innocence and quiet desperation that lodged into his chest and refused to let go. The child was tiny, probably 7 or 8, wearing a jacket that looked far too thin for the December air, sleeves barely reaching his wrists. His hands clutched a plastic bag, crinkling around 2 pieces of hard, stale bread. Daniel's eyes followed the boy's gaze, which kept flicking nervously to a woman sitting on a bench nearby. Her posture was tense, shoulders hunched as if trying to make herself invisible, but there was no mistaking the silent shame in her expression. She was his mother, and the boy's words had already cut through every layer of self-protection she tried to hold up. Daniel had been there once himself. Years ago, after his wife passed, he had carried his daughter through nights where the only warmth in their apartment came from a shared blanket and the faint hope that tomorrow might be better. The memory was raw, and it hit harder than he expected. It wasn't just sympathy he felt, it was recognition, a deep, almost physical pull that told him this was a moment where he could make a difference. He took a slow step inside, his eyes fixed on the boy. That bread, where did you get it? His voice was calm, gentle, but there was a softness in it that made the boy stop trembling even for a second. From the bin outside, the boy admitted, his words almost a whisper. I washed it. Mommy said she's not hungry, but she didn't eat since yesterday. Daniel's chest tightened. He could almost see himself in the boy, his daughter's cheeks flushed from hunger, the stubborn pride that refused to ask for help even when it was desperately needed. There was a world where he could have walked past, dropped off the donation, and left. But some things were impossible to ignore. This was one of them. He crouched down to meet the boy's eyes, forcing himself to slow down, to really see him. Can I meet your mom? He asked, carefully. The boy hesitated for a heartbeat and then nodded, stepping aside to guide Daniel. As they walked, Daniel observed her more closely. She was young, probably in her late 20s, with dark circles under her eyes and hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap, knuckles white from tension. Every movement suggested exhaustion, not just physical, but mental, emotional, the kind that comes from constant, quiet struggle. When she finally lifted her head, her eyes met his with a mixture of embarrassment and fear. I'm sorry, she whispered. He shouldn't have asked you. We are fine. Daniel shook his head slowly, a soft smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. I've said those same words before, he said quietly. And I wasn't fine either. The boy sat down beside her, leaning into her arm as if he feared she might break apart without him there. Daniel's heart ached. He didn't need her story to know enough. The empty bag, the threadbare jacket, the subtle ways she tried to hide her struggle. She was fighting alone, the way so many parents did, trying to shield their child from a world that seemed determined to punish the vulnerable. I can help, Daniel said after a moment, not wanting to overwhelm her, but unable to hold back. Not much, but something small. Can I get you both something warm? Something to eat. Her eyes widened, a mix of surprise and hesitation. Pride made her shrink back, but the boy's small hand tugged gently at her sleeve. Please, Mommy, he murmured. She looked down at him, her expression softening. Finally, with a quiet nod, she agreed. Okay, she whispered. Just, thank you. Daniel reached for his phone as they stepped outside, the winter air biting at his cheeks, but the warmth of the moment carrying them forward. He called a nearby cafe he knew, small, cozy, the kind with warm lighting and the smell of baked bread and coffee that wrapped around you like a blanket. 2 hot meals, some soup, and anything sweet for the boy, he instructed. I'll be there in 5 minutes. The boy's eyes lit up, and for a moment, the world seemed to tilt in their favor. She still hesitated, shame and pride warring inside her, but the small spark of hope in her child's face was impossible to resist. As they walked to the cafe, Daniel kept the conversation light, asking the boy about school, about his favorite books, about the small things that made a child's world bright even when the larger world was grey. The boy spoke cautiously at first, then faster, words tumbling out in the way children do when they feel safe enough to share. You like superheroes? Daniel asked, smiling. Yeah, the boy said, nodding vigorously. Mommy says I can be brave even if I'm scared. Like Captain Braveheart. He grinned at his own invention, and Daniel laughed. The sound was warm, resonant, and for the first time that day, The boy's shoulders relaxed. His mother followed quietly, letting him talk, her own gaze shifting between Daniel and her child. There was an unspoken acknowledgement in her eyes, a recognition that someone finally saw her struggle, not as weakness, but as a story of survival and love. By the time they reached the cafe, Daniel had already paid for the meals. The barista greeted him with a nod. They had met briefly before through charitable events he occasionally sponsored. Within minutes, the table was laden with soup steaming in ceramic bowls, bread warm and soft, and small pastries that smelled sweet enough to melt the chill from anyone's bones. The boy's eyes widened in amazement. "Really?" he whispered. Daniel knelt again. "Yes. Eat as much as you want. And don't worry about the price. Today, it's all for you and your mom." The boy dove in, and she ate slowly at first, hesitating as if she didn't trust that she could take from the world without shame. Daniel watched quietly, letting the moment breathe, understanding that for some, even small gestures of kindness could feel like enormous gifts. "Can I ask you something?" he said gently. She looked up, a faint tremor in her hands. "Of course. Have you been okay? Truly okay?" Her gaze fell to her lap. 3 months, she admitted softly. "I lost my job. Then the apartment. I tried to find work, but with no childcare, no one takes a chance. I just wanted to make it through the day without my son noticing too much. That's why I let him. I let him ask for bread. He's always trying to help me, even when I can't help myself." Daniel's chest tightened again. He reached out, placing a hand lightly on hers, not in judgment, not in pity, but in acknowledgement. "I know that feeling," he said. "I've carried my daughter through winters like this too. You're doing the best you can, and that's enough." Her lips quivered, and the boy looked between them, his small eyes reflecting a mixture of relief and curiosity. For the first time that day, she allowed herself to breathe, just a little, the weight of survival eased by the presence of someone who understood. Daniel smiled softly. "You're not alone in this," he said. "And sometimes, the smallest step, sharing a meal, asking for help, can be the start of something bigger. Something that makes all the difference." The boy cheered softly, muffled by the bread in his mouth, and his mother smiled, shy but genuine. Daniel knew that this moment, small as it seemed, was the beginning of something that could change all their lives in ways they couldn't see yet. And as he watched them, he realized that sometimes it took just one small plea, a child offering expired bread, to remind someone that the world could still be a place of hope, warmth, and human connection. The cafe smelled like freshly baked bread, hot chocolate, and coffee, the kind of warmth that wraps around you even before you touch anything. The boy's eyes widened as he looked around, taking in the cozy atmosphere with a mixture of disbelief and wonder. Daniel led them to a corner table, near the window where the sunlight spilled in, highlighting the soft steam rising from the mugs of cocoa and soup. The mother hesitated, hands fidgeting in her lap as if she wasn't used to being treated with such care. Daniel placed the hot soup and sandwiches in front of her and the boy, then handed him a small chocolate pastry. The boy's face lit up in a way that made Daniel's chest ache with something he didn't even try to name. "Really?" the boy asked between bites, his voice muffled. "Yes," Daniel said with a gentle smile. "Eat as much as you want. Today, it's all for you both." The boy dove in eagerly, and she ate slowly, almost cautiously at first, as if tasting kindness for the first time in weeks. Daniel watched quietly, understanding that moments like these weren't just about food. They were about recognition, safety, and the simple joy of being seen and cared for. After a while, he leaned in slightly, speaking softly. "Can I ask something? How long have things been like this?" She swallowed, eyes flicking to the table as if ashamed, then whispered, 3 months. I lost my job. Then the apartment. I tried applying everywhere, but with no childcare, no one will take a chance. I didn't want him to go hungry, so I tried to manage it all myself." Daniel nodded slowly, keeping his voice low and comforting. "I know that feeling. I've been there too. Nights when you're just trying to make it through, keeping your child from knowing how scared you really are. It's exhausting, isn't it?" Her lips quivered, and the boy leaned closer to her, as if sensing the weight behind her words. He's always trying to help me," she said softly. "Even when I can't help myself." Daniel's heart tightened. That's how it should be. Kids have that natural instinct to care. And you're doing your best. That's enough. Really. The boy looked up at Daniel, eyes shining with the innocence of someone who had been surviving quietly, but now felt safe enough to breathe. "See, Mommy." He understands. She laughed softly, a sound fragile but genuine, and it filled the small space of the cafe. Daniel felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the coffee or the soup. This was human connection, the kind that quietly shifts the world, one small gesture at a time. As they ate, Daniel noticed small details. The mother's hands were rough from too much work, the boy's sneakers scuffed from running errands, the faint tremor in her voice whenever she thought no one was listening. But there was also strength, quiet determination, and a bond between mother and child that no hardship had yet broken. Once they had eaten, Daniel gestured toward the boy. Would you like to take a little walk outside? There's a small park nearby. It's bright and sunny today. You can run a little if you want. The boy's eyes sparkled, and the mother hesitated, worried about stepping outside with him in cold weather, but the boy's hand tugged hers gently. Please, Mommy. Let's go. Daniel smiled and stood, helping them both to the door. The cold air hit them, but it didn't matter. The warmth from the cafe and the kindness they had received lingered, making the winter chill feel like a small thing in comparison. As they walked toward the park, Daniel spoke gently to the mother. I don't want to overstep, but I have a part-time assistant opening at my company. Flexible hours, and I can cover childcare if you need it. It's nothing fancy, just a chance to get back on your feet. Her eyes widened, a mixture of shock and disbelief. Why? Why would you do that? Because someone helped me when I was at my lowest, he said softly. And I promised myself that if I ever stood on solid ground again, I'd help someone else do the same. Today, you're that person. Her lips trembled, but she nodded slowly. I don't know how to thank you. Start by trusting yourself, Daniel said. You're stronger than you realize. And tomorrow, come by my office. We'll figure out the rest together. No pressure, no judgment, just a hand to help you stand a little taller. The boy bounced on his feet beside her. See, Mommy. He's helping us. She looked down at him, then back at Daniel, a tear slipping quietly down her cheek. I've been so afraid. Afraid of asking, afraid of depending on someone. I didn't know anyone would care. Daniel shook his head. It's okay to be afraid, but it's also okay to accept help when it's offered. You're not alone anymore. They reached the small park, where the sunlight made the snow sparkle. The boy ran ahead, kicking at the icy patches, laughing freely, while his mother watched, a smile spreading across her face in a way Daniel hadn't seen since they first arrived. For the first time that day, she seemed to exhale, allowing herself to be present in a moment without fear or worry. Daniel stayed with her, letting her watch the boy play. You know, he said quietly, sometimes the smallest gestures, a warm meal, a listening ear, can change more than we think. One step at a time, and things can start to look different. She nodded slowly. I hope you're right. I know I am, he said with quiet certainty. And I'll help however I can. The boy came running back, cheeks flushed and sparkling with excitement. Mommy, look at this. He pointed to a small frozen puddle he had jumped over and over, proud of his own courage. She laughed, a genuine, free sound, and Daniel felt that same warmth spread through him again. You know, he said, turning to her, the fact that he's still able to laugh, still able to see the little joys, that's a sign of how strong you both are. You've made it this far, and now we can make the next steps together. Her eyes filled with tears again, but this time with relief and hope. I think, maybe we can start over. Not from zero, but from here. Daniel smiled, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Exactly. From here, forward. You're not alone anymore. The boy came back and hugged them both, his small arms connecting them in a bond of trust and gratitude. Daniel felt a quiet pride, knowing that this moment, simple, unassuming, a meal and a conversation, was laying the foundation for a future where fear no longer ruled. As the sun dipped lower, casting golden light across the snow, Daniel realized something quietly profound. Sometimes all it takes is a small plea, a child's simple act of asking for help, to set a chain of kindness in motion. That plea had led to warmth, to connection, and to the beginning of something that would change all their lives, not through grand gestures, but through consistent, small, human acts of care. And as they walked back toward the cafe to warm their hands before heading home, the boy skipping ahead, his mother smiling beside him, Daniel knew that today wasn't just about a meal. It was about hope, trust, and the invisible threads that tie strangers together into a family, even if only for a moment. That moment, small and quiet as it seemed, was the start of a new chapter. A chapter where kindness, empathy, and understanding weren't just words, they were action. And in that action, lives could transform quietly, powerfully, and forever.